Jack had always been known as Earth's greatest war hero. He was a soldier who had fought in battles no one else could win. His name was known across the galaxy, and every victory he claimed added to his reputation. But Jack was tired. He was done with fighting. He just wanted to live a quiet life, away from the attention. That was until the Galactic Council called on him for a mission. The Council had arranged a peace negotiation with the Carings, alien species from a planet far away. Jack wasn't thrilled. He'd seen enough war to last a lifetime. Mission was different. It wasn't about fighting. It was about talking. And so, Jack found himself on his way to the Carings' homeworld, hoping that this would be the last thing he ever had to do as a soldier. The moment Jack landed on the Carings planet, he felt the weight of the place. Towering metal buildings surrounded him, and the streets were filled with aliens unlike any he had seen before. Their technology was far more advanced than anything Earth had. He couldn't help but feel a bit out of place. His guide was a woman named Princess Nalia. She was tall and strong, with sharp features that made her seem almost otherworldly. Her presence commanded attention, and she walked with the grace of someone who was used to being in charge. Jack had heard of her. Nalia was known for her wit and intelligence. She was also the one leading the peace talks. They met in a grand hall, where the negotiation was set to take place. Jack was prepared for everything. He had studied the Carings, their culture, and their history. But he wasn't prepared for Nalia. "Welcome, human," she said, her voice rich with confidence. "I've heard so much about you. I hope you'll live up to your reputation," Jack chuckled. "I'll try my best." Nalia smiled and waved a hand in a teasing gesture. "Well, if the peace talks don't work out, you could always marry me. That'll make the negotiations a lot easier." The words were a joke, a light-hearted comment made to break the tension.
Oh.
But Jack didn't know how to respond. A moment he just stood there, unsure. Nalia's eyes were full of mischief, and her smile was playful. She was not at all what he expected. He laughed, trying to brush it off. "Well, I'll consider it if the peace talks fail," he said, unsure if he was joking or not, but something about the way Nalia looked at him made him pause. She wasn't like any woman he had met before. She didn't look at him with awe or admiration like others did. She looked at him like an equal. "Good," Nalia replied. "You have to know how to laugh at yourself if you're going to make it through these talks." And that was how their first meeting went. Simple joke, a brief laugh, and a lot of tension that never seemed to go away. But Jack couldn't stop thinking about Nalia, her confidence, her beauty, and the way she made him feel, both challenged and admired. The peace talks began, but Jack wasn't entirely focused. He couldn't help but steal glances at Nalia as she spoke with the Carings leaders. She was brilliant. She knew how to sway a room with just a few words, and her power was evident. Jack was used to commanding attention, but this woman had something different. Over the next few days, Jack and Nalia spent more time together. The meetings were long and tiring, but there were moments of lightness in between. Nalia had a way of breaking the seriousness of the situation with her dry humor. She kept making small jokes. It's always about Jack and his hero status. "You must be tired of everyone calling you a hero," she said one night after a particularly long meeting. "It must be exhausting being so important." Jack smiled, not sure how to respond. "It's not all it's cracked up to be," he admitted. "I just want to find a little peace." Nalia looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "Is that why you agreed to come here? For peace?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, I think so. I've fought enough. I just want something normal now, something real." There was a pause before Nalia spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I understand. I think we all just want something real." That moment stuck. With Jack, he hadn't expected Nalia to open up like that. In the midst of all the political games and power struggles, there was something genuine about her. She was more than just the princess of the Carings. She was a person, just like him. The days passed and the negotiations continued. Jack and Nalia's interactions grew deeper. There was a connection between them, but Jack was careful. He didn't want to mix business with personal feelings. But every time Nalia smiled at him, or teased him, or challenged him, he felt something stir inside. And then one evening, after another long day of talks, Nalia made another joke. Maybe we should. Just call it quits and run away together, human. I could use a good partner in crime, she said with a wink. Jack didn't laugh this time. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment he wondered what it would be like to say yes. But he couldn't. He was Earth's greatest war hero. And he had a reputation to uphold. No matter how much he wanted to, he knew he couldn't just throw it all away for. The days after the first meeting between Jack and Princess Naia passed quickly. The peace talks were long, filled with complicated discussions about trade agreements, borders, and military cooperation. But through it all, Jack found himself growing more and more interested in Nalia. It wasn't just her intelligence or her quick wit that caught his attention. It was the way she carried herself. She wasn't just a princess, she was a leader. Every word had weight, and yet, she never seemed to take herself too seriously. She had an effortless confidence about her that was hard to ignore. Jack couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked at him. It wasn't with admiration like most people did. It wasn't with fear, like many of the enemies he'd faced. It was something else, something real. She looked at him as if he were just another person. Someone she could joke with, challenge, and even tease. And for once, Jack didn't mind being the subject of her jokes. He found himself laughing, even when she poked fun at his war hero status. One evening, after a long day of discussions, they found themselves alone on the balcony of the palace, looking out over the city. The view was breathtaking, as the stars twinkled above, and the distant hum of alien ships filled the air. You know, Nalia said, her voice soft, I've been to so many of these talks, and they're always the same. But there's something about you, Jack. You're different. Jack raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Different? How? Nalia turned to face him, leaning against the railing. Most people come into these meetings with their minds already made up. They just want to win, to get what they want. But you actually listen. You're not trying to impress anyone. You just speak your mind. Jack smiled. Never been good at pretending. I can tell, Nalia replied, her eyes gleaming with a hint of mischief. I think that's why I like you. There was a pause, and Jack found himself feeling strangely vulnerable. He had spent so much of his life being the one in charge, the one with all the answers. But with Nalia, he felt like he could just be himself. No pressure. No expectations. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural. Jack wasn't used to being around someone who could make him feel like this. He'd always been surrounded by soldiers, leaders, and people who admired him. But with Nalia, he was just a man. You know, Jack said after a moment, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect you to be so normal. You're not what I thought a princess would be like. Nalia laughed, her voice light. What? Did you think a princess would be like? I don't know, Jack said with a shrug. I guess I thought you'd be all serious, maybe a little cold. Someone who only cared about politics. Nalia's laughter died down, but there was a softness in her expression. I guess I could be like that. I could be cold and distant, like everyone expects me to be. But that's not me, not really. Jack studied her for a moment. There was something in her eyes, a hint of sadness that she was trying to hide. He didn't say anything, but he wondered what it was that had made her like this. What kind of life had she lived to make her feel like she had to wear a mask? You don't have to be like everyone else, Nalia, Jack said, his voice sincere. You're your own person, and I respect that. She smiled at him, the expression warm but thoughtful. Maybe one day I'll believe that? Jack didn't know what to say to that. He could sense there was more to her than she was letting on. But for now, he was content just being in her company. There was something comforting about it. Something that made him forget the weight of his past. The next few days were filled with more discussions and more subtle interactions between them. And when a poor sandman with the one of arrest the 5-minute man with it may I'd have died. I just sour you rock if I was at him with those sharp, observant eyes. She wasn't just listening to his words. She was studying him, trying to understand him, and Jack found himself doing the same. He was starting to realize that he wasn't just interested in the woman who had challenged him in the negotiation room. He was beginning to care about the person behind the princess. One night, after a particularly long day, Jack and Nalea found themselves alone once again, this time in a small garden near the palace. The stars above were especially bright that night, and the cool breeze rustled the leaves around them. "Jack," Nalea began, her tone more serious than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about not pretending." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "I think I've been pretending my whole life," she said quietly, "pretending to be someone I'm not, pretending to be this perfect princess who has all the answers. But deep down, I'm just like everyone else. I'm scared, Jack. I'm scared that I won't live up to the expectations that everyone has of me." Jack's heart softened. He had never heard Nalea speak like this before. She had always been so confident, so in control. But now she was showing him a side of herself that was raw and vulnerable. "You don't have to be perfect, Nalea," Jack said gently. "No one is. You don't have to carry the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders. You're doing your best, and that's all anyone can ask for." Nalea looked at him, her eyes shining in the dim light. "I wish I could believe that." "You will," Jack said, his voice firm. "You just have to trust yourself." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, filled with understanding. Jack realized that this wasn't just a diplomatic mission anymore. It was something more. Somehow, he knew that whatever happened next, he would always remember these moments with The peaceful days on the Carinx planet didn't last long. Tensions began to rise again. The negotiation was nearly complete, but there was still the matter of military cooperation between the Carinx and Earth. A final agreement had to be signed. But something in the air felt off. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change. One evening, as Jack was walking through the palace halls, Nalea stopped him. Her face was serious, her usual teasing smile replaced by a rare look of worry. "Jack, we need to talk," she said, her voice lower than usual. Jack raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" Nalea's expression grew more urgent. "There's been an attack. One of the neighboring systems has been taken over by an enemy fleet. The Carinx military is preparing for war. And the Galactic Council is calling for Earth to step in." Jack frowned. The last thing he wanted was more conflict, but he knew what his duty was. "Are you asking for help from Earth's fleet?" "We need more than just help," Nalea said. "We need someone who knows how to fight, someone who can lead." Jack sighed. He had been hoping to retire from all of that, but the reality was different. She couldn't ignore a call for help, especially with the lives of so many at stake. He had been Earth's greatest war hero for a reason, and now that reputation was going to be put to the test once again. "I'll gather the fleet," Jack said quietly, but there was a hint of hesitation in his voice. Nalea noticed it. "You're not just doing this for Earth, are you?" she asked, her voice soft. "You're doing it for me." Jack looked at her, his eyes meeting hers. He couldn't lie to her. He had always tried to keep his emotions locked away, but with Nalea, it was different. She had seen sides of him that no one else ever had. "I'm doing it because I know what's at stake," Jack said. "But yes, part of me is doing it because I trust you. I believe in you." Nalea nodded, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. "I don't want you to risk your life for me, Jack. I care about you more than I ever thought possible. I also know what you're capable of, and I need you." Jack reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you, or your people." Their eyes locked for a long moment, and Jack could see the fear in Nalea's gaze. She was strong, but even she had her doubts. The situation was becoming more dangerous by the hour, and the pressure on both of them was growing. The next morning, Jack boarded the human warship that had been sent to the Caring system. It was one of Earth's most powerful vessels, capable of decimating entire fleets in seconds. As Jack took his seat at the command center, his mind was focused on the task at hand. There was no time for distractions, no time for personal feelings. The battle ahead would require all of his attention. The mission was simple, at least on paper. The Carings and Earth would form an alliance to fight off the invading enemy fleet. Jack was to lead the charge, using his knowledge of warfare to outsmart and outmaneuver the enemy. But nothing about war was ever simple. As the fleet traveled toward the battlefield, Jack found himself thinking about Nalea. She had always been the one to make him laugh, to remind him that there was more to life than war. But now he had to put those thoughts aside. The galaxy was counting on him, and he couldn't afford to fail. The first signs of the enemy appeared on the radar. A massive fleet of ships, unlike anything Jack had ever seen before, emerged from the darkness of space. They were well armed, their technology far superior to anything Earth or the Carings had. But Jack wasn't intimidated. He had faced tougher odds before. "Prepare for battle," Jack ordered, his voice calm and steady. "We fight for Earth, we fight for the Carings, and we fight for the future." The warship's cannons powered up, and the battle began. Jack's strategy was simple: outthink the enemy. He had learned long ago that victory wasn't just about firepower. It was about knowing your enemy and using their weaknesses against them. The first wave of enemy ships launched their attack, but Jack had anticipated their movements. With a quick command, he ordered the human fleet to flank them, catching the enemy off guard. The battle raged on, with explosions lighting up the dark expanse of space. For hours, Jack remained at the helm of the warship, giving orders, making quick decisions, and watching as the enemy slowly fell back. He could hear the cheers of his crew as the enemy fleet was destroyed, but his mind wasn't on the victory. It was on Nalea. He couldn't help but wonder if she was watching from her planet, waiting for him to return. As the battle came to an end, Jack's heart felt heavy. He had done his duty, but the cost of war was always high. He had seen many good men and women fall in battle, and he knew that the peace they had fought for might never be fully realized. Back on the Carings, planet Nalea was waiting. When Jack returned, she was there, standing tall, her expression a mix of relief and worry. She rushed to him as soon as he stepped off the ship. "You did it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You saved us." Jack nodded, but his heart felt distant. "We saved each other," he said quietly. The moment felt heavy between them, and for a second, neither of them knew what to say. But Jack could see the gratitude in Nalea's eyes. She was no longer just the princess of the Carings. She was someone who had seen the true cost of leadership, the burden of duty, and the sacrifices made along the way. "You're a hero, Jack," Nalea said, her voice soft. Jack shook his head. "I'm just a man who does what needs to be done." For the first time in a long while, Jack didn't feel the weight of his past. He felt something else, something new. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the beginning of something. The days following the battle felt like a blur. The victory against the enemy fleet had been hard-earned, but it had come at a cost. Earth's fleet had lost several ships, and many soldiers had been injured or killed. The Carings too had suffered losses, though they were far fewer in number. Jack had spent the better part of the next few days overseeing repairs and ensuring the wounded were treated. The peace talks, which had once seemed like a distant priority, were now on the verge of collapse as both sides dealt with the aftermath of the war. But amidst all the chaos, one thought kept creeping into Jack's mind. Nalea, since the battle, he had barely seen her. She was busy with the political fallout, organizing memorials for the fallen soldiers and trying to maintain control over the Carings government. Jack understood, but he couldn't help but feel distant from her. It was as if the woman he had once connected with so easily was now a world away. It wasn't until one evening, a week after the battle, that Jack finally saw her again. He was walking through the palace gardens, trying to clear his mind, when he noticed her standing by a fountain, gazing into the water. She seemed lost in thought, her posture stiff, her usual confident demeanor gone. Jack hesitated for a moment. Before walking over to her, "Nalia," he said softly. She turned, her eyes meeting his, and for the briefest second, Jack saw something he had never expected to see in Hertha, same vulnerability he had once shared with her. "Jack," Nalia replied quietly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Jack gave a small smile. "I could say the same about you. It's been a while." Nalia sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "I've been busy. There's been so much to do. But I've been thinking about what happened. About everything." Jack frowned. "About the battle? About the treaty?" No, Nalia said quickly, shaking her head. "About us. About what you said." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What I said back on the ship?" "After the battle, when you told me you trusted me," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about you, about us." Jack didn't know what to say. The words had slipped out in the heat of the moment, and now, with the weight of the war behind them, they felt even heavier. But he couldn't deny the truth of what he had said. He did trust her, cared for her, and part of him had been hoping that this moment would come, that she would finally understand how he felt. "I didn't mean to make things complicated," Jack said, his voice quiet. "I just thought I didn't want to hide from the truth. I didn't want to pretend that what we had was just some passing thing." Nalia took a step toward him, her gaze intense. "I never thought it was just a passing thing, Jack. But I don't know if I'm ready for what that means. You're Earth's greatest war hero. You fought for everyone, but who's going to fight for you? Who's going to be there when you need someone to trust?" Jack's chest tightened. He had never been asked that question before. He had always been the one to do the fighting, to take care of others. But now, with Nalia's words hanging in the air, he felt exposed. He realized that he hadn't thought about what he needed, what he wanted, in a long time. "I'm here, Leia," he said, his voice steady but vulnerable. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, Nalia didn't say anything. She just stood there, her eyes searching his, as if trying to find something in him that she had been missing. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed a hand on his chest, her fingers brushing against his shirt. "You're sure about this?" she asked softly. Jack nodded. "I'm sure. You're not just the princess of the Carings. You're more than that. You're someone I care about. I don't want to lose that." Nalia's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to smile, a real smile. "I've never been good at trusting people," she admitted. "Especially not someone like you. But I want to try. I want to see where this goes." Jack felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had never realized how much he needed to hear those words until now. He reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." They stood there for a moment, just holding hands, the silence between them comfortable. The sounds of the palace gardens, the rustling of leaves, the soft chirping of insects seemed to fade away as they focused solely on each other. But just as Jack thought the moment was perfect, Nalia spoke again, her tone teasing. "You know, you're still Earth's greatest war hero," she said with a grin. "I'm not sure how I'm going to keep up with you." Jack chuckled. "I'm not asking you to keep up with me, Nalia. I'm asking you to stand by my side." Nalia raised an eyebrow. "That's the kind of proposal I could get behind." Smiled, feeling a lightness in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt like he had something worth fighting for. The war might have been over, but Jack knew that. The real battle was only just beginning. And this time, he wasn't going to face it. The days after their conversation in the garden passed quickly. Jack and Nalia grew closer, their bond becoming stronger with each passing moment. But the peace they had worked so hard to achieve was still fragile, and soon their world would be tested once again. News came in from the outer regions of the galaxy enemy forces. Those who had been defeated in the last war were preparing for another attack. This time, they were more organized, more dangerous. The Carinx had only begun to rebuild their forces, and the Earth's fleet had just returned from the battle with the previous enemy. The timing could not have been worse. "We need to act fast," Nalia said, standing next to Jack in the war room of the Carinx palace. "Our scouts report that the enemy is mobilizing, and if we don't stop them now, they could sweep through the entire galaxy. Earth, the Carinx, and the other species are all in danger." Jack nodded, his mind already working on a plan. He had been through this before: wars, strategies, and battles, but something about this felt different. It wasn't just a fight for survival this time. It felt personal. He had more at stake now. He had Nalia. He had Earth. He had a future to protect. "Let's start by gathering our forces," Jack said, his voice steady but determined. "We'll need to strike fast and hard before they have time to organize." The element of surprise is key. Nalia glanced at him, her eyes full of admiration. "You really think we can do this? You think we can stop them?" Jack looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of the question. He knew how much was riding on this. The stakes were higher than ever, but he couldn't afford to show doubt. "Not in front of Nalia, not in front of anyone. I've led us through tough battles before," Jack said, his voice firm. "And we've won. We can win this one too. Just have to be smarter than they are." Nalia nodded, her face hardening. "With determination, then let's get to work." The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Jack and Nalia worked side by side, strategizing, coordinating with the Earth fleet, and ensuring that the Carinx forces were ready to fight. It was exhausting, but every moment spent preparing felt important. They couldn't afford to waste time or make mistakes. As the day of the battle drew closer, Jack found himself thinking more and more about Nalia. She had become so much more than just the princess of the Carinx to him. She was his equal. She was the one he trusted, the one who understood him in ways no one else did. And now, with everything on the line, Jack knew that no matter the outcome, he was fighting for her as much as he was fighting for peace. The night before the battle, Jack and Nalia stood together once more, this time on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the city. The stars twinkled above, and the wind carried the faint sound of the waves crashing against the shore. "You know," Jack said, his voice soft, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said earlier, about fighting for me, fighting for our future." And Nalia turned to him, her eyes searching his. "What do you mean?" Jack hesitated, his heart heavy with the weight of his words. "I've never fought for something like this before. I've fought for duty, for honor, for the people I swore to protect. But now, ... now I'm fighting for something more. I'm fighting for a life with you, life where we don't have to constantly be at war, where we can be ... happy." Nalia's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jack saw the vulnerability in her that she had been hiding. Jack ... "I feel the same way. I want that future too. But we can't do it if we don't win this war, if we don't stop them." Jack stepped closer to her, taking her hands in his. "We will win. We have to. For us, for the galaxy, and for everyone who believes in what we're fighting for." Nalia smiled, the expression full of warmth and trust. "You're right. We will win. Together." The next morning, the battle began. It was a fight like no other Jack had faced before. The enemy fleet was massive, their ships far more advanced than anything Earth or the Carinx had ever seen. He knew that if they could outthink the enemy, they could win. The Earth fleet and the Carinx forces worked together, seamlessly coordinating their movements and using their combined strength to push the enemy back. But it wasn't easy. The enemy was relentless, and the battle raged on for hours. Jack watched as his soldiers fought with everything they had, knowing that every decision he made could mean life or death. Nalia, too, was at the heart of the battle, commanding her forces with the same skill and determination she had shown in the palace. She was no longer just a princess, she was a warrior just like Jack. As the hours passed, the tide of the battle slowly began to turn. The enemy's ships were starting to break apart, their forces crumbling under the combined might of Earth and the Carinx. Jack's heart pounded as he gave orders, watching the enemy retreat in defeat. "We've got them on the run," Jack said, his voice tense but triumphant. "Keep pushing forward." Nalia's voice came over the comms. "We're with you. Jack, we're finishing this." And then, just when it seemed like victory was in sight, a sudden explosion rocked the ship. Jack's stomach dropped as alarms blared and the lights flickered. The warship had taken a direct hit. "Damage report," Jack shouted, his voice sharp. "Shields down to 30%, Captain," the crew member reported. "We're still in the fight, but we need reinforcements." Jack didn't hesitate. "Get the backup fleet in here now. Can't let them get away." The battle wasn't over yet. But with Nalia by his side and their combined forces fighting for their future, Jack knew they would win. Had to believe that as the battle raged on, Jack's resolve only grew stronger. There was no turning back now. He wasn't just fighting for peace, he was fighting for the life he wanted to build with. Jack stood at the command center watching the final reports come in. The enemy fleet had been defeated, their ships either destroyed or scattered, and their forces were in full retreat. The Earth fleet, alongside the Carring's military, had emerged. Victorious? But for Jack, the weight of the battle still pressed on his shoulders. The victory was hard-earned, but it had come at a cost. He glanced at the damage reports. Many of his crew members were injured, and several ships were badly damaged. The cost of war was always high, no matter the outcome. Yet there was also something else, something more important than any victory or defeat. For the first time in years, Jack found himself thinking about the future. The future with Nalia. He had come to the Carring's planet to fight, to protect, and to help negotiate peace. But somewhere along the way, something more had blossomed between them. It wasn't just the camaraderie of war, nor was it just the thrill of battle that connected them. It was something deeper, something real. He had fought for the galaxy, for Earth. But now he realized there was something else worth fighting for, a future with Nalia, a life beyond the battlefield. But as much as he wanted that future, Jack knew that there were still challenges ahead. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and peace, as they both knew too well, was fragile. The comms crackled, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Nalia's voice. "Jack, are you there?" she asked, her voice full of relief and fatigue. "I'm here," Jack replied, his voice steady. "How's the situation on your end?" "We've secured the Carring's forces. The enemy is retreating, and the remaining ships are being pushed out of our system. But there's something else." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Nalia was silent for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. The other species in the galaxy, the ones who had been watching this war from afar, they're already starting to negotiate terms. But there's still a lot of tension. Some of them want to take advantage of the chaos to increase their power. I think we both know what that could lead to." Jack frowned. "So the war might not be over after all." "No," Nalia said firmly. "Not yet, but we have a chance now. We have the strength to stop it before it starts. Earth and the Carring's are united, and that means we can lead the way for others." Jack thought about her words. He understood what she was saying. The peace they had fought for was still fragile, and they needed to build on their victory. The next steps would be just as important as the battle they had just fought. "We'll have to act fast," Jack said. "We can't let them take advantage of this." "We will," Nalia said. "I'm coming to Earth to meet with the leaders of the other species. We'll find a way to make this peace last." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. "I'll be here waiting. We'll face this together." A few days later, Nalia arrived on Earth with her delegation, and the two of them worked tirelessly to meet with leaders from other species. The talks were tense, but Jack could see the determination in Nalia's eyes. She was no longer just the princess of the Carring's. She was a leader, a diplomat, and someone the galaxy would listen to. The days spent in meetings and discussions were long, but Jack never left Nalia's side. He was by her side as they navigated through the political landscape, using their combined strengths to advocate for peace and unity. It was a difficult process, but with each passing day, the support for their cause grew stronger. At the end of the week, they finally managed to reach a historic agreement. The factions that had once been at odds now stood united. The war was over, and the galaxy could begin to rebuild. As the final treaty was signed, Nalea turned to Jack. "We did it," she said, her voice soft with exhaustion and relief. Jack smiled and pulled her into a hug. "We did it together." For a moment, they just stood there, holding each other. The weight of the past few weeks had finally lifted, and Jack could feel the future unfolding before them. It wasn't just the end of a war. It was the beginning of something new, something worth fighting for. A few months later, after the treaty had been signed and the galaxy began to heal, Jack found himself standing on a small hill overlooking a peaceful meadow. It was the first real break he'd had in years, and he was spending it with Nalia, far away from the battlefield. Nally stood beside him, her hand in his, looking out at the horizon. "I can't believe it's finally over," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "Yeah, it feels strange. It's like we've just entered a new chapter." "I think it's a good chapter," Nalia said with a smile, turning to face him. "One where we can finally start living the life we've both been fighting for." Jack smiled back, his heart full of hope. "I'm ready for that." Nalia took a step closer, her eyes soft. "Jack, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. After everything we've been through, after everything we've fought for, ... will you marry me?" Not as a joke this time. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected this, but as soon as the words left her lips, he knew his answer. "Yes," he said, his voice full of certainty. "I'll marry you." And in that moment, as the sun began to set and the stars began to shine above them, Jack realized that the greatest battle he had ever fought had led him here to this moment of peace. With Nalia by his side, the galaxy had been through war, through chaos, and through darkness. But now there was light, a new beginning. And Jack knew that together they could face whatever came next.